Simplify the complex process of fat loss. Eat less than you spend. It's the perfect recipe for frustration. Social networks only provide superficial advice and food lists for fat loss, which doesn't truly help anyone. But the reality is much deeper. Why are there people who eat more than you and never seem to gain weight? How does your nervous system relate to the amount of fat you can lose? Are there validated ways to reduce cravings? Today you're going to discover 7 little discussed key pieces that have to do with how your neuroendocrine system, nervous system, and hormones govern fat loss processes. If you understand them and put them into practice, the path of fat loss will become much more bearable for you, although it's almost never easy. In fat, there are alpha and beta adrenergic receptors, and you need to activate the correct ones. Adrenergic receptors are proteins located on the surfaces of cells that bind to catecholamines, mainly to adrenaline and noradrenaline. You recognize them because they are the hormones of the immediate fight-or-flight acute response. These receptors are part of your sympathetic nervous system and powerfully regulate fat metabolism. There are 2 types, the beta-adrenergic and the alpha-adrenergic. What you need to know is that the activation of beta receptors promotes the lipolysis of fatty acids through the activation of a protein, an enzyme, called hormone-sensitive lipase, the hormone-sensitive lipase. Remember that to lose fat, you needed 2 things, right? Lipolysis and beta-oxidation. Lipolysis is, simplifying, the process by which we take the fatty acids out of the cell and pass them into the blood. We break down fats into fatty acids and make those fatty acids available to the rest of the cells. And oxidation is the process of burning or using fat in the mitochondria to generate energy locally in that cell. Therefore, beta receptors in adrenergic more fat loss. Alpha receptors, particularly alpha-2, when activated, hinder nuances. The fat loss, they are a brake. The problem is that we have more alpha receptor density in the abdomen and visceral fat, especially in the case of males, and this can pose a problem. And you might ask, why is nature so cruel? Well, we need a certain amount of fat in the midsection of the body to protect our internal organs. Don't forget about this. Fat isn't there to make your life difficult. Fat is also necessary. It has many functions. In women, these alpha receptors are more concentrated in the waist, hips, and buttocks, which is thought to be related to childbirth. And this would explain why men and women have different patterns of fat accumulation. The million-dollar question then will be, how do we activate the beta receptors without activating the alpha ones? Activating beta receptors is challenging. High-intensity exercise or controlled intermittent cold exposure can increase catecholamine levels to achieve this. But especially exercise, unless you have a very continuous and very regular exposure to cold. Here, it is important to vary the intensity of the exercise. One more reason to alternate between medium or low-intensity work and high-intensity work. High-intensity. This combination would be the most beneficial, since, while high-intensity work would stimulate the production of these catecholamines and stimulate this activation of beta-adrenergic receptors, low-intensity work would help to oxidize more fat, more beta-oxidation. Second point, fat cells should not be isolated. Even though we only talk about calories and food, the connectivity between your hormonal nervous system and fat cells is a major determinant of fat loss. 2 very ignored aspects are the irrigation and innervation of the fat tissue. Nutrients and neurohormonal signals are delivered to fat cells and all body cells via nerves and small blood vessels, a topic rarely discussed. An isolated fat cell can never be emptied of fatty acids. The bladder can't empty because it lacks the necessary signals. Precisely the areas where stubborn fat accumulates are areas with insufficient irrigation and innervation. Colder areas, areas that are more isolated like the lower part of the abdomen. What is the only thing you can do to improve the irrigation and innervation of your adipose tissue? Well, start exercising. Exercise releases angiogenic factors that form new blood vessels. In addition, it delivers nutrients more efficiently to areas that are already well irrigated. However, increasing an area's irrigation is very challenging. There must be a balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system for fat loss to occur. This isn't easy to explain, but it's important. Your autonomic nervous system, which you can control, has 2 branches, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And we have explained this in other videos, like this one about the vagus nerve. One coordinates the fight or flight response, and the other, the recovery, rest, and digestion response. There must be a balance between both arms, but our environment, your lifestyle, leads you to a clear imbalance in favor of the sympathetic nervous system. There is a parameter that values the balance between these 2 arms, and it is called heart rate variability. Good heart rate variability indicates an optimal ability to respond to internal and external stressors, while when it is low, it indicates an unbalanced, less resilient and susceptible system that veers towards chronic stress. When your variability is low, the stress load is high, you sleep worse, you are more tired, you oxidize less fat, and you have an appetite for more caloric foods. Therefore, working to increase your heart rate variability is another way to know that you are going in the right direction. To increase it, include at least 180 minutes of weekly physical exercise in Zone 2. I'll explain what Zone 2 is and how to enhance it in this video. Develop stress reduction techniques such as slow nasal breathing for 5 minutes every morning, meditation, yoga, whatever you want. Boost your deep sleep minutes every night, reduce caffeine and alcohol consumption, or have proper, progressive, or controlled exposure and do things right in the cold. Fat loss also depends on the quality and quantity of muscle mass. One of the big mistakes in medicine is to think that to solve overweight and obesity, we only had to focus on adipose tissue, where the problem is, that is, on fat. And today, we know that the main tissue that you have to heal, take care of, enhance, optimize, improve to start losing fat is the muscle. The muscle determines 3 very important things. Your basal metabolism and muscle tissue are more metabolically active than fat, making them among the most active in your body. This means that muscle mass can increase an individual's basal metabolic rate, which is the amount of energy your body burns at rest, without doing absolutely anything. But not only that, it will also increase the calories you burn when you're not at rest, when you're moving. The famous non-exercise activity, thermogenesis, physical activity, and the calories you burn training, the energy expenditure of physical activity, energy expenditure of physical activity. The net amount of lipid oxidation is also modulated by muscle mass. Muscle mass is a very important site for the oxidation of fatty acids during and after physical exercise. Why? Because the muscle requires a lot of energy. With more muscle available for lipid oxidation, there can be a greater use of fat as an energy source, which contributes to the reduction of adipose tissue and prevents that fat from accumulating where it should not. Your metabolism's health is largely determined by your muscle mass, which affects your fat set point. If you lose 10 kilos of weight, of which 5 are muscle and 5 are fat, you are much more likely to regain those 10 kilos and some extra than if you lose 10 kilos of weight, but 8 are fat and 2 are muscle. On the other hand, don't forget that the main determinant of your insulin sensitivity is your muscle. A healthy and active muscle is almost incompatible with having insulin resistance, as the muscle cleans your blood of any excess glucose and therefore prevents the pancreas from having to overproduce insulin. Small movements have enormous importance. What differences exist between those people who seem to never gain weight and whom you envy, and who, no matter what they eat, seem not to gain even a gram? And those who have to be constantly watching what they eat day after day to not gain weight. Many differences, and some are genetic and cannot be influenced. But one of the differences is the amount of so-called fidgeting. What is this word? Well, this word refers to those small involuntary unconscious movements that we all make at some time, especially when we feel nervous, busy, right? Tapping your foot, twirling a pen between your fingers, playing with a stress ball, tapping on the desk. These small movements may seem like a real nonsense to you, but it is hypothesized that they are an unconscious effort of our nervous system to maintain health in a sedentary environment, in an environment where movement is scarce, where we have amputated movement from our society. In fact, it's interesting because there's an inverse relationship between the amount of fidgeting you do daily and physical activity. Let me explain. This is really simple. If one day you feel like getting up and running a half marathon, as long as you're not a runner and you're not used to doing it, that day you won't make these unconscious movements hardly at all. Notice how essential movement is, that when our environment makes it difficult for us to move, your body moves for you, or in an anarchic way, or without apparent sense. The big butts or restless people are those who, through these stereotype movements and made habit, can burn an extra, pay attention, up to 1,200 calories each day compared to someone who does not have fit dieting. And this is a lot of calories, a lot. Enough to make you one of those people who eat a lot but don't gain any weight. And this can be achieved in many ways without becoming obsessive. A standing desk is an option. Personally, when working while sitting or standing, I consciously raise my heels and perform a plantar flexion with the ankle until it becomes automatic. You can move your fingers, legs, hands, well, you can do it in different ways. Cravings can be reduced scientifically. I'm used to dealing with patients who strictly adhere to their exercise, rest, diet, supplementation plan, but they don't get close to their goals. Why? Because of those darn cravings. In English, cravings refers to an intense desire to consume a particular food. For example, chocolate, ice cream. And this happens even when hunger is not the main motivator of that desire. In fact, it is usually not true physiological hunger that motivates these cravings. Fortunately, there are foods and supplements that can minimize them. Let's examine 3. Glutamine. Glutamine, an amino acid, may help reduce cravings for sweets and ultra-processed foods due to its functional properties. It does this by raising glucagon-like peptide -1 levels in your digestive system. Why? Because glutamine is food for the cells that line your intestinal barrier. Glucagon-like peptide, one is a gastrointestinal hormone that generates satiety, and you will recognize it from the famous drugs. But we also have glucomannan, which is a fiber, a dietary fiber derived from the root of the konjac, and it is one of the most potent promoters of satiety that exist. Another strategy would be what I call anticipated protein boluses. What does this mean? Well, strategically taking 20 or 30 grams of protein at the times of the day with the highest density of cravings. This strategy is very simple and useful. These moments usually occur when you're idle, at home, resting, usually during the last hours of the day. So how do I personally do it? Well, if I see that my mind is thinking about chocolate, custard, rice pudding that's in the fridge, which I usually don't have but sometimes I do, I grab a natural yogurt, add 20 grams of whey protein or a kefir and add the protein, specifically this one from Full Gas, and I take it. It produces such satiety that it becomes very difficult to maintain any cravings afterwards. You should train and take care of your microbiome. Losing fat while having digestive alterations is like climbing a mountain with a 15-kilo weighted vest. It will cost you much more unnecessarily. Here are 2 reasons why it's worth investing time to improve this. The first is that the microbiota affects the amount of energy you extract from the diet. In this way, there are microbiotas that promote obesity, while others protect you from obesity. Part of these differences are genetic and others are environmental. And although we do not have absolute clarity on how to convert one into the other, the reality is that a diet rich in soluble fiber and anti-inflammatory foods favors a microbiota that helps you maintain a correct fat percentage. A diverse microbiota that will help you. The microbiota produces substances, as you recall. Short-chain fatty acids are produced in the microbiota when it is healthy and regulate lipolysis, lipogenesis processes, in addition to improving your insulin sensitivity. Yes, we're talking about butyrate, propionate, acetate, incredible molecules that I'm not talking about now, but you have here a very recent video about butyrate. Wow, you need a moderately healthy and diverse microbiota to be able to lose fat efficiently. Achieving this takes time, but don't worry. Start taking steps in the right direction, and you'll eventually improve your microbiota. Have a daily intake of some fermented food. Choose the one you like the most: sauerkraut, kefir, yogurt, fermented pickles. There are many. Yes, increase your heart rate variability, as this is closely related to your digestive health, as I explained in the vagus nerve video. Keep in mind that consuming fermented foods and probiotics won't improve your microbiota and digestive health if you also regularly eat ultra-processed foods, drink alcohol, are stressed, and sleep only 5 hours instead of the recommended 8. Which of these tips do you find most practical in your day-to-day life? Have you managed to lose fat by implementing any of them? See you next time. Thanks for being there. Thank you, because with your subscription, this still makes sense. Let's go for the 2 million followers. A big hug to and keep empowering.